Next section we look at, last section we're going to look at is pressurization. This is still covered in ATA 21. Okay. So the function, why we have this, we want a safe and comfortable altitude or safe and comfortable environment, which is in this case cabin altitude for the passengers and crew, and allow the aircraft to operate. But we want to go up to higher altitudes where the turbine engines and the aircraft are more efficient. So anything above 10,000 feet, you have to have supplemental oxygen or a pressurization system. Okay? And most of these airliners are flying somewhere when they're at cruise in the 30 to 40,000 foot range. Corporate aircraft often go above 40 to 45,000 foot. Okay, three main requirements for our for pressurizations. We have to have a pressurization vessel, something we're going to pressurize, a container, a source of air, pneumatic and environmental control system, and finally outflow valves to control how much air leaves that pressure vessel. So our pressure vessel, again, our fuselage, high strength, typically aluminum, some nowadays are carbon fiber, but small light aircraft have a max differential pressure from the inside to the outside of roughly 3 to 5 psi. Large recips, 5.5 psi, and then pretty much any of your turbine aircraft are going to be upwards of 9 psi, although the 787, I want to say it's close to 11 psi, but again, I don't remember the exact number. And what that allows is it allows the plane to fly higher but maintain a lower cabin altitude. What that does is one of the biggest contributing factors to jet lag and making people feel crappy after flying is that they've been at altitude for an extended period of time. So if you can keep that cabin altitude lower, your passengers are more comfortable, your pilots have clearer heads, and all that good stuff. Our sources, we talked about the engines. So turbine engines we typically use. Most of your regional turboprops, jets and larger, are going to use direct bleed. This is, we take air right off of the compressor section. With some of your smaller aircraft, and I'm going to skip, I'll get back to the middle in a second. With some of your smaller corporate jets and turboprops, rather than, they don't have enough excess air on the engine, as we hook a turbocharger to the accessory gearbox or a compressor to the accessory gearbox, and we use that. That's what our King Air uses. There's a turbocharger hooked to the left engine gearbox that provides pressurization bleed air. That's not bleed air, it's pressurization air. The other thing you'll get is in some cases you have a lot of excess bleed air on larger aircraft where you can get a lot of pressure, and rather than sucking a ton of air off the engine, we don't need as much pressure for the cabin. You know, there might be 200 psi available from the engine or 300 psi available from the engine. We saw with like a motive flow pump earlier, we can use a high pressure to create a lower pressure, higher volume flow. So on large aircraft, they typically have a compressor. They run a lower volume, high pressure flow over a turbine, and that turns a compressor that doesn't compress to, it doesn't create as much pressure, but it creates a lot more flow. So they might call them like a flow boost system or that. So typically flow boost means we don't have to pull as much air from the engines because we can use the pressure and convert it to a higher flow. We will stop here and I'll finish.